Jacob chase. The field stretched wide before him, black against the storm-lit sky. The mud pulled at his legs, slowing him down, the rain making everything slick. Behind him, Sampson's voice, low and steady. "Ain't nowhere to go, boy." Jacob ran faster. His legs burned, his breath ragged and sharp. He could see the road, the old dirt path leading towards town. If he could make it there, if he could just get that far. A gunshot split the air. Boom! Jacob ducked instinctively, his feet slipping beneath him. He hit the ground hard, rolling through the mud, his shoulder slamming into a jagged tree root. Pain flared through his ribs. Sampson was taking his time. Jacob twisted around, gasping, trying to pull himself up. He could barely see the farmhouse through the rain, but he could hear the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps in the mud. Sampson was walking, not running, not chasing, just stalking, hunting. Cain thought he could hide too, Sampson called through the darkness. Jacob's stomach turned to ice. His lungs burned as he forced himself forward, feet sinking deep into the mud with every step. He had to keep moving. The trees ahead were thick, but if he could just reach them, another gunshot. Boom! Jacob felt the air shift beside his head. He wasn't aiming to kill, not yet. The hunter and the prey. Jacob stumbled into the woods, branches cutting at his arms. The storm had turned everything into a maze of shadows, the wind howling through the trees. He pressed his body against the trunk of an old oak, his breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. Silence, and then a whistle. Low, steady. Sampson. Jacob clamped a hand over his mouth, trying to quiet his breathing. The footsteps stopped. Jacob squeezed his eyes shut. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't. A twig snapped. Jacob spun, and Sampson was there. A massive shadow stepped through the trees, shotgun hanging loose in his grip, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Ain't no running from the Lord, son." Jacob didn't think. He grabbed the nearest rock and swung. The impact was hard, blunt, fast. Sampson staggered back, the shotgun slipping from his grasp. Jacob didn't stop. He grabbed the gun, turned it in his shaking hands, and fired. Boom! Sampson jerked back, crashing into the mud. Jacob stood there, shaking, breath coming in sharp gasps. He stared at Sampson's still body. He didn't wait. He ran. The trees blurred around him, the road getting closer, the lights of the town barely visible through the rain. But behind him, the sound of laughter. Deep, wet, choking. Jacob's blood ran cold. He turned. Sampson was rising. Blood ran down his chest, his hands sinking deep into the mud as he pushed himself up. His eyes locked on Jacob, and he smiled. "The wicked always run." Jacob staggered back, turned, and ran faster. This time Sampson didn't walk. This time he ran. Jacob stumbled into town, his legs barely carrying him. His body was soaked through with rain and sweat, his hands slick with mud and blood, some his, some not. His breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, his ribs screaming with every step. He reached Main Street, the old wooden buildings looming under the dim glow of the street lamps. The town was quiet, the storm having driven most folks indoors. He had made it. He was safe. But he had to tell someone. He saw the sheriff's office up ahead. A warm glow spilled from inside, the old neon sign buzzing faintly. Jacob ran for it. He threw open the door, nearly collapsing onto the floor.
"Help me,"
he gasped.
"Please, You have to help me. He's trying to kill me.
Sheriff Roy Lambert looked up from his desk, a thick man in his 50s, belly spilling over his belt, a mug of coffee in his grip. He blinked, leaning back in his chair. "Son, what the hell happened to you?" Jacob clutched the edge of his desk, his hands shaking.
Sampson, Farmer Sampson, he took me. He tied me up. He's hunting me.
Roy let out a slow breath through his nose, setting his coffee down. He didn't jump to his feet. He didn't reach for his gun. He just leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Sampson." His tone was level, calm. "Now, son, are you sure about that?" Jacob stared. His heart dropped.
Yes, I'm sure, he snapped. He tried to kill me. He shot at me. He's insane.
The door creaked open behind him. Jacob froze. He turned slowly, and there, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, face still smeared with dried blood, was Farmer Sampson. Jacob's stomach turned to ice. The farmer stood tall, calm, collected. His lip was split from the scuffle, his flannel stained, but he wasn't out of breath. He wasn't panicked. He just shook his head, letting out a disappointed sigh. "Ain't there something?" Sampson muttered, tipping his hat back. "Boy runs wild into town, spouting all kinds of craziness." Jacob took a step back.
No, he's lying. He had me tied up.
Sampson raised his hands. Now, let's all just take a breath." His voice was so damn reasonable. "Sheriff, I swear, I don't know what's gotten into this boy." Jacob shook his head violently.
"You're lying. You're a monster. I saw what you did.
Roy exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temple. "Son, you're hysterical." Jacob froze.
No. Sheriff, please."
Roy shook his head. "Farmer Sampson's been a good man for 20 years. Helps his neighbors, goes to church every Sunday, ain't never had a lick of trouble." Jacob felt his whole world shift. Roy leaned back in his chair. "And you, son, you come into my office screaming that he's some kind of killer." Jacob's chest heaved, his fingers gripped his shirt, his ribs aching. No one believed him. No one was going to believe him. And Sampson knew it. He could see it in his face, that calm, knowing expression, the tiniest curl of his lips. He had won. Jacob took a shaky step back. He had to run. He had to. A hand gripped his wrist. Jacob whipped around, and he found himself staring into another pair of eyes. Deputy Thomas Holt, late 20s, lean, quiet, the only one in the room who hadn't spoken. Jacob's breath hitched.
"Please."
Holt's grip tightened for half a second. Then he let go, just a little. Jacob looked up. Holt's face was blank, but his fingers moved, just barely. A silent message. Go. Jacob didn't hesitate. He yanked his arm free, shoved past Sampson, and ran. The escape. The storm had picked up again. Jacob ran through the streets, his breathing burning, his mind racing. No one believed him. The town was his enemy. But someone had let him go. Holt. Jacob didn't look back, didn't stop, didn't breathe, because somewhere, just outside of the city, standing in the rain with the pigs, Edith was waiting, and she was praying that Sampson would bring her another lost sheep. Jacob had to keep running because the hunt wasn't over. Not yet. The general store. The old bell above the door jangled as Farmer Sampson stepped into the town's general store, his thick boots thudding against the wooden floor. His flannel shirt was clean, his overalls freshly pressed, not a drop of blood in sight. And in his hands, wrapped in crisp butcher's paper, was a fresh batch of bacon. "Morning," he said, voice low and steady. Martha Jenkins, the store owner, looked up from her counter, pushing up her glasses.
Well, if it ain't the best bacon in town.
Sampson smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Ain't that the truth? He reached for the package, unwrapping just a corner to inspect the deep red marbling. Perfect.
This is from your pigs?
She asked. Sampson chuckled, shaking his head. Always? He handed her the rest, watching her carefully as she weighed the meat, marking down the sale. There was no rush, no urgency, nothing to hide, because there was nothing to find. Not anymore. Jacob's desperation. Across town, Jacob burst into the sheriff's office.
He killed people. You have to listen to me.
Sheriff Roy Lambert sighed, rubbing his temples. Son, you're making a scene. Jacob's chest heaved.
You don't get it. There was a sack. I saw. I know what he's doing.
Roy stood up slowly. And where's this sack now? Jacob froze, his throat tightened. Roy spread his hands. You got a body, a witness, anything that don't sound like a fever dream? Jacob stared at him. He was still covered in dirt, still shaking, but Roy's face was calm, like he already knew the answer. Jacob's mouth opened, but nothing came out. No body, no crime. By the time Sampson left the general store, the town had already heard about Jacob. The boy had lost his mind, they said. Running wild, ranting about murder. No evidence, no proof, just stories. Sampson walked back to his truck, whistling softly. In the back, beneath a tarp, lay a few fresh sacks. But they were empty now. Jacob had escaped. That was his mistake. If he had died, they might have looked for him. But since he was alive, the town had already decided. Jacob was the liar. Sampson just kept walking because the pigs were fed, and tomorrow they'd be hungry again. A feast to remember. Sampson stood by the counter watching as Martha Jenkins carefully wrapped the last of the bacon. The store smelled of sawdust, dried herbs, and something warm, a pie cooling on the back shelf. Martha smiled, tightening the butcher's paper with precise fingers.
You always bring the best meat, Sampson.
He nodded, slow and steady, his hands resting on the counter. Then he said it. Got some great chops coming in. Martha looked up, intrigued.
Oh?
Sampson's eyes didn't blink. Big feast tonight, if you want to stop by. The store felt too quiet. The words hung in the air. Martha's fingers hesitated over the tape roll, just for a second. Then she smiled again, that polite, small-town smile.
Well, that sure is kind of you.
Sampson just watched her. The silence stretched. And then, as if something unseen had settled between them, she asked,
Who's all coming?
Sampson grinned, slow and wide. Oh, just folks who need saving. Martha nodded, tying the last package. The register dinged. The deal was done, and Sampson tipped his hat, turned and walked into the mist. The feast would be ready soon, and the pigs, they were already waiting. The invitation that can't be refused. Martha watched Sampson leave. The old wooden door creaked shut behind him. The bell jingled softly, too softly for how heavy the moment felt, and she let out a slow breath. Her fingers were still resting on the last package of bacon. She should have said no. She should have said she had plans, but she didn't, and now she didn't know why. The road to the farm. The sun had almost set when Martha finally got into the car. She sat behind the wheel, staring at the road ahead. She should turn around, go home, lock the doors, but something kept pulling at her. What if she didn't go? Would Sampson come knocking? Would he ask questions? Would he already know the answers? Arrival. The farmhouse was lit up. warm, inviting, like nothing terrible had ever happened here. But the pig pen was dark, and the pigs silent. Martha stepped onto the porch. The door creaked open before she could knock, and there stood Edith, waiting, smiling, like she'd been expecting her all along.
"Come on in, honey,"
Edith said sweetly. Martha hesitated. Then, with a breath that felt too heavy, she stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her, and from the darkness of the pens, the pigs finally began to stir.
How delicious. Especially for the pigs, I suppose.
Reminds me of my old days when I used to live in a small town in Greece.
Though I never made the bodies,
I more put them in the ground later.
But I stuck out like a sore thumb, a 7-foot lady with greenish skin. I couldn't be nothing but a grave digger or a god to those people.
Well, maybe I was both, I don't know.
At any rate, keep on dropping them bodies, Sampson. Night, children.